Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church, and I'm here today to finish up our week on the series of I Pray. And it seems most appropriate that the last one I talk about is Jesus and what he said. So if we look in chapter 17 of the Gospel of John and verses 20 and 21, we find these words. Jesus said, I pray not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father and I in the world. And may they be one in us, so that the world will believe you sent me. Well, this is an interesting prayer. It comes near the end of this chapter, and actually, the 17th chapter of John is really the prayer that Jesus prayed. I know we talk about the Lord's Prayer, our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name, that sort of thing. But that's not really the prayer that the Lord prayed. Chapter 17 of John is that one. And he says in here that he's praying not only for the disciples of the day, but all those later who will believe, which means that Jesus is continuing to pray for you and for me. Well, I know it's been over 2,000 years since he was walking around on this earth, but he's still praying for us. You see, God's limit of how long he'll hang around is beyond anything you and I can imagine. Certainly beyond anything you and I have ever experienced. And so in this prayer, Jesus makes this rather profound statement. And as I've said all week, if they're saying I pray for, that must be something really important. So what is he praying for? I'll read it again. I pray that they will all be one, just as your Father, just as you and I, Lord, are one. I pray that they all be one. Now, what does that mean? Well, in the beginning of the church, there was only one church, and nobody thought of having more than one. And then there were problems in the Catholic Church, which was that one church. And then there were problems when the what's now known as the Eastern Orthodox Church split off. And then there were problems in the 1500s when the Protestant Reformation began, and then there were Protestants. And then there were problems in the 1700s when Henry VIII of England decided he wanted his own church, and so now we had the Church of England. And since then, there have been churches upon churches upon churches upon churches who split for reasons good or bad. Not going to comment on that. And most recently, in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, there was a great attempt in the Protestant church in the United States to merge together to form one church, or at least a few less numbers of churches. But here by the 2020s, it's all kind of unraveling again. So whatever one means, it's not an organization of one. That's, I don't get it. I mean, I really don't get it. There's something else involved here. And the other part is what many people think of this is we're agreeing in all things. Well, come on. Do you and your best bud or wife or kids agree in all things? If you're a church person, does everybody in your church agree on all things? Heck, I don't even agree with myself sometimes. And I don't say that frivolously. There's some things I just keep changing my thoughts about. So it's not that. And if it were that, Acts chapter 15 gives us a perfect example of why it can't be that. Acts 15, there's a church council. Paul and Peter have gone off, preached to the Gentiles. James has stayed and preached in Jerusalem with the Jews. And they have this big discussion as to who can really be a Christian. And there's some very different opinions. They finally settle it down to just a couple things. And that works well for a while. So the agreement on all things isn't it either. I don't know why in our culture today, if you don't agree with me on everything, then we can't be friends. That always has struck me as strange. When I was a younger preacher, part of a denomination, I realized that everybody didn't preach like me, or at least a lot didn't, and I didn't preach like them. But I realized that if I wanted the freedom to preach the way I felt I should, then I had to give them the same freedom, even if they preached something differently. What gave me the right to dictate that my way of preaching was the only way? Well, only my personal inner self, who, for whatever reason, wanted to be the authoritarian figure. And that's not what it is. So, what is it? It's apparently pretty important. Jesus wants us to be one. And what is the one about? It's one in following his example. Now, I know the rhetoric today has, I forget the official term, uh, the King Jesus, the one who pounds people over the head. Well, that's been around since Constantine in the 4th century. It's not a new idea. But there is a Jesus who, if you look at his life, went around with compassion and caring and concern for all people, even those who were very much not like him. So we should be one in our choices to minister to people in the name of the Lord. And we should fellowship one with the other, not because we agree with everything, but because we worship the same God. You know, when we die, we're not going to find a whole bunch of different rooms for this church and that church and this church and that church. It's all going to be one. And that's exactly how we ought to act in this world. And Jesus says to do this so that the world might see. So I hope this week this weekend, this next week, you will act like Jesus. Every time, everywhere, every chance you get. Well, you think about it. Thanks for listening this week. I'll be back next week with another series. If you have a need or a concern, let us know. We'll do everything we can to help meet your need as fast as we can. Until next Monday, God bless you. I'll talk to you again.